As more Canadians returning to work and to school, and researchers around the world are racing to find newer and faster ways to detect the virus. And one of them joins me now, Dr. Johnson Obaseki, surgical oncologist and assistant professor at the University of Ottawa. Good morning to you, doctor.
Good morning to you.
What's interesting here, so you are looking at a saliva test. So for some of our viewers who aren't, the nasal test is the one that is traditionally being used here. What does a saliva test entail?
So our study, we used a saliva test where you basically provide a 1 milliliter sample of saliva into the top of a small test tube. It has a funnel to allow for easier retrieval of the saliva into the test tube. And then upon closing the test tube, there's a membrane that's broken that allows a fluid to mix in with the saliva with a substance that stabilizes the genetic material from the virus, as well as has a virucidal or a substance that kills the active portion of the virus for safe shipping to a lab.
So how effective would this be compared to the nasal test that we are seeing right now?
Yeah, so the saliva testing looks like it's slightly less accurate than the swab testing. So in our study, there were both the saliva tests as well as the swab tests they both missed a few positives, but it looks like the swab testing did not miss as many as the saliva testing.
So why is it that, I mean, obviously Health Canada would need to approve this test, and it would be ideal for something, let's say, a young child to do versus a lot of people who maybe have the anxiety about doing the one up the nose. So what are the steps then in potentially getting this approved to move forward with it?
Yeah, so I think Health Canada was a little bit hesitant to approve tests without the appropriate data to back our knowledge around how the test works and what the ins and outs of the test are. But we're hopeful that now that they have some data, they're armed with some data to understand the testing, that they will proceed with approval.
So we're looking at what's happening out west with the GARGLE. So, a lot of people have the questions, why can't that be rolled out somewhere here in Ontario? What do the provincial rules look like? Are they variant? Do they change? Why not do something like that here? Or why would a saliva test work better here? What does that whole process look like?
Yeah, so I mean, most of that process is really run by our government officials. My role has been more along the lines of providing data and rolling out studies in real world circumstances to provide them with the data that they need. But each of the saliva tests will have to be approved at a provincial level. And so each province will have to decide which test they think is most appropriate for their population and what is best able to be managed by their labs that have to actually process the samples.
Okay, we know here that they're looking to team up with some of the pharmacies rolled out potentially this week to help those lines because we've seen them. They are hours long. I understand that you have one of these saliva tests near you that you can sort of do a little show and tell for us. Okay, so what are we looking at here?
So this is the kit. So this could be done in your own home or at school or potentially at work. And so what you would do is you provide the saliva sample just into the top portion here into the funnel. And it's only a 1 milliliter portion that needs to be filled up. And then, as I mentioned, there's a membrane here in the top of the kit that once you close it, it releases that membrane and allows the fluid to mix in with your saliva. And then this kit would need to be shipped to a lab for further processing.
Okay, so let's say an individual was doing this. Are you seeing this as more of an individual doing it in their own households or something that would still need to be done? Okay, so in their own household. Is there a window of time that saliva needs to get to the labs for processing?
Yeah, so the kits that we used are stable for long periods of time. So, I mean, not that I'm recommending that people wait long periods of time, but certainly the amount of time to get the kit from your home to the lab would not be a problem at all because there is a preservative that's mixed with the genetic material. Just as an example, for the purposes of our study, some of the samples at the beginning of the study waited 2 weeks before they were processed. And that was, again, just for the purposes of the study, but it tells us that the genetic material is stable for long periods of time.
So, doctor, this all sounds wonderful. This all sounds great as another, again, as they like to say, a tool in the toolkit. But so what is the next step for you to potentially get this approved?
Well, I mean, like I said to you, my role is really more on the science end of things. So I think I've provided the data that would be potentially necessary to consider approval. And then in my mind, it's more the next steps would be along the lines of determining, are there specific groups of people that would be best benefited by using this type of testing? Are there groups of people that aren't able to access testing centers because they live in remote areas or rural communities? Or people who are challenged from a socioeconomic standpoint, perhaps these tests could be provided to people like that who have a harder time accessing the testing center. So those would be sort of more what I would see as the next steps here.
Really interesting. Well, hopefully we will chat again and with some further news here. Dr. Johnson Obaseki, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, time now is 7:45. We're going to take a quick break here this Monday morning. We'll see you in just a sec.
Closed captioning of this program is brought